Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a speculative scenario that, honestly, feels like something out of a geopolitical thriller. We're talking about a potential crisis over Greenland, a situation that our source materials suggest could seriously test and maybe even break the Western alliance as we know it.
All right, so here's the game plan. First, we'll get into why Greenland is suddenly this massive global prize. Then, we'll look at the alleged hybrid warfare playbook the US might use to control it. From there, we'll see how this could push a major alliance to the absolute brink. And finally, we'll ask the big question. Could this completely remake the world map?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. To really wrap our heads around this whole thing, you gotta ask one simple but really important question.
So why would anyone risk it all for a giant sheet of ice? Well, the answer isn't on the ice, it's under it. According to the sources we're looking at, we're talking about a literal treasure trove of resources, the kind of stuff that's absolutely critical for the 21st century.
The key to this whole puzzle? Something called rare earth minerals. And you know, the name is kind of misleading. They're not actually rare. The problem is they are a massive headache to mine and process. But here's the kicker. They are the secret sauce, the magic ingredient, in pretty much all of our modern tech.
I mean, just think about it for a second. We're talking about everything from clean energy tech and advanced defense systems to the smartphone that's probably in your hand right now. These things are the invisible backbone of our world, and Greenland is sitting on a mountain of them. And this is where the geopolitics really kicks in. As this EU Reporter article points out, the West is desperately trying to find new sources for these minerals and break its dependency on China. And suddenly, boom, Greenland, with all its untapped potential, goes from being a remote island to a critical strategic prize. It's a complete game changer.
Okay, so the prize is huge. The stakes are incredibly high. So how would a superpower go about trying to get its hands on it? Well, our sources detail a kind of playbook for a new type of conflict, one that's fought in the gray zones, in the shadows.
This strategy has a name, hybrid warfare, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's this murky blend of tactics that sits in a gray zone. It's not full-blown war, but it's definitely not peace. You're mixing everything together. Fake news, diplomatic arm twisting, maybe even some sneaky electoral interference.
And the timeline our sources lay out shows how this could escalate step by step. First, an uninvited visit from the VP. Then, reports of a PR campaign to push Greenland towards independence. Then, intelligence services spotting agents on the ground. And it all builds until, bam, the White House just comes out and says military action is on the table.
And this is where the quiet part gets said out loud. A quote reported in the New York Times from a White House official, Stephen Miller, is just breathtakingly blunt. The U.S. has the right to take Greenland. I mean, wow. That's not subtle pressure anymore. That's a direct claim.
And the fallout from this is just staggering. This whole campaign allegedly forces Denmark to do something completely unthinkable. For the very first time in its history, its own intelligence service names the United States, its ally, as a national security threat, right up there with Russia and China. Think about that for a second.
So, as you could probably imagine, this didn't exactly go unnoticed. America's closest allies had, well, they had some thoughts.
Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen didn't mince words. First, she called the whole idea absurd. And as things got more intense, she basically told the U.S. to back off and stop threatening a close, historic ally.
And it wasn't just Denmark. The sources show a united front forming, and fast. The EU, the UK, all the Nordic countries, they all came out with statements of full solidarity. The message was crystal clear. Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders, and its future is their call to make.
And this creates a massive existential problem for NATO. I mean, the whole point of NATO is Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. But what happens when the attacker is one of the all, specifically the biggest and most powerful one? It turns the alliance's core principle completely inside out.
Which leads us to the final part of this puzzle, and maybe the most alarming consequence of all. We're talking about the potential for the entire post-World War II global order to just unravel. You know, sometimes the bluntest takes come from online discussions. This Reddit user from a geopolitics forum just lays it out there. If the US attacks a NATO country militarily, then NATO is dead. And that really gets to the heart of it, right? It's a line you just can't uncross.
And the speculation on what comes next is pretty bleak. Commentators imagine a world where NATO collapses. What would that look like? Probably a new, independent European military. Maybe more countries in Europe wanting their own nukes. For the US, it means losing its biggest source of global power.
while Russia and China get a huge strategic win. Oh, and probably a global economic crash for good measure.
And here's the ultimate irony, as another commenter points out. The US might get Greenland, but in the process, it would lose everything that gave it real power. It would be trading its entire network of alliances, the true foundation of its global influence, for one island. That's not just a bad trade, it's a catastrophic one.
And so, this whole speculative scenario leaves us with one final, really tough question to think about. When a country's own self-interest goes head-to-head with the alliances it's built, which one is going to break first?